Everyone. Well, welcome to this pre-conference publishing summit for Diversity MBA. I am Randal Pinkett, co-founder, chairman and CEO of BCT Partners, and the author of Data-Driven DEI, Tools and Metrics You Need to Measure, Analyze, and Improve Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. So I'm going to do a very brief overview of the book and talk a bit about the methodology and the content. And then I'm going to open the floor for questions and answers and engage with all of you to see what questions or topics you'd like to discuss. I imagine that data is and will continue to be a very important and timely topic to the work we do in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I look forward to the conversation and look forward to the dialogue. So with that, let me go live with my slides and just do a brief introduction and a brief overview of the book. So by way of introduction, I mentioned earlier, I'm Randal Pinkett. I'm one of the co-founders of BCT Partners. I am a managing partner at the firm and also serve as chairman and CEO. My background is at the intersection of three areas. My formal training is as that of a computer scientist, electrical engineer.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Hold on, Danielle, we got your audio coming through. All right, she's on mute. My formal training is as that of a computer scientist, electrical engineer, and computer engineer. So technology and data are very much a part of my background and my journey. The second area of my background, not surprisingly for this audience, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've been in the DEI arena now for 3 decades and more as a speaker, as an author, as a trainer, as a facilitator, and as a strategist. Work with organizations across the globe on how they can be more diverse, more equitable, and more inclusive. And then third area of my background is an area known as asset-based community development, which is how do we build communities through the lens of their assets and not their liabilities, or their strengths and not their limitations. So you could say I sit at the intersection of technology and data, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and healthy communities. And that, therefore, perhaps is no surprise that I've come to the intersection of those three in authoring Data-Driven DEI. My firm, BCT Partners, we've been doing this work for 23 years now. Our mission is to harness the power of diversity, insights, and innovation to do 3 things: transform lives, accelerate equity, and create lasting change. We are an equity-centered consulting firm that's powered by research, by data analytics, by technology and innovation. And we are very much a evidence-based organization. Data drives our decisions, data drives our analysis, data drives how we support and scaffold the organizations that we work with. Data-Driven DI is actually my 5th book. My first 2 books were focused on entrepreneurship. Campus CEO for student entrepreneurs. I was a student entrepreneur. And then No Money Down CEO, as I say, was for broke entrepreneurs, because I was also a broke entrepreneur. I had no money to put down, and so I was a No Money Down CEO. My 3rd and 4th books were focused on the journeys of African-American professionals. Black faces in white places. How do you navigate environments where we are still underrepresented and not lose a sense of who you are? And then the follow-up to that, which I call the remix, the sequel, Black Faces in High Places, which is 10 strategic actions for Black professionals to reach the top and stay there. Operative words, stay there. And then just earlier this year, released my 5th book, Data-Driven DI, the tools and metrics you need to measure, analyze, and improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, I know if I were to have seen a book entitled Data-Driven DI, I would have my ideas of what the book is likely to be about. But let me lay out an important framing for the book that may or may not belie one's intuitive expectations of what this book is focused on. First and foremost, this book is not focused on DEI leaders or DEI champions or members of DEI councils. That's not the primary audience. That might sound counterintuitive. The primary audience for this book is everyday people. Each and every one of you and your colleagues and your loved ones and your neighbors, that's the primary audience for this book. The secondary audience is indeed DEI leaders and champions and practitioners and consultants and et cetera. But I centered the book on people first and organizations second. Why? Because I know what many of you know. In fact, you all probably know this better than I do, that organizations don't change. People change. I believe we've done a wonderful job in the DEI arena of articulating the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion to organizations. Some might term that the business case or the organizational case, whatever you term it. But I believe we've done not so good a job of articulating what I would describe as the personal case for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Like, why should it matter to you, to me, to us, to we, to a person? And so I put people first and at the center of this book, because if people are willing and able to drive their own diversity, equity, and inclusion journey, and for data to drive that journey, one could argue the organizational journey will take care of itself. Whereas now organizations are trying to convince employees to get on board. What if people were already on board and simply more amplifying of what may or may not be the journey of their organizations? And so the book is really two parallel tracks, and it vacillates between the two. The chapters vacillate between the personal journey and the organizational journey. Both topics are tackled in tandem and in parallel and in concert with one another. So when you look at these 5 criteria for what is data-driven DEI, I want you to look at this through the lens of this list of criteria is applied to people and organizations alike. Are you using data? Is your organization using data to perform ongoing assessment? Have you established objectives and clearly defined goals against those objectives to know that you've accomplished the objective? Are you leveraging proven and promising practices based on research, science, and the experience of practitioners, which includes people with lived experiences? 5th, have you defined or developed strategies with clearly defined measures to gauge progress against those strategies? And then 5th and finally, are using data to gauge progress, evaluate results, demonstrate impact, and above all, hold people accountable. If you can check all 5 of those boxes, then you are data-driven for your personal journey or for your organizational journey. And here's what I believe is my second to last slide before we open the floor for questions and answers. So the book is based on a 5-step cycle, which begins with a step 0, which you see at the top of the screen. Step 0 are these deeper penetrating questions to clarify the answer to the question, why does DEI matter to you or your organization in the first place? That is the self-reflection and introspection to wrestle with, why do you even want to begin or undertake a journey for diversity, equity, and inclusion? Which lands you, as you can see, at a DEI mission and vision. Not a mission and vision, but a DEI mission and vision. Once you've clarified those incentives, be they intrinsic or extrinsic, you then get into this 5-step cycle, which you see in the colors and in the arrows that visually depict that DEI is a journey, not a destination. Dare I say, a data-driven journey, not a destination. So it begins with step, and you may also have already noticed the alliteration on the letter I. Every step begins with the letter I. So you've got incentives to clarify the why. You've got DEI inventory to understand where you are so you can know where you're going. To perform an assessment so you have a profile and a baseline of where you begin or where you are in your journey. That then moves to DEI imperatives, determining your priorities. What are you trying to accomplish? Then to DEI insights, one of my favorite steps, because DEI insights says, before you decide what strategies to pursue, look to see what's worked for somebody else. Don't reinvent the wheel. In the book, we refer to these models of what works for people and organizations as a what works model. So identify what works for somebody else, some other organization. And then finally in step 4, decide what you're going to do. So many of our clients at BCT, and I saw Demita, my colleague, and Jay, my colleague, know that our clients want to jump right to 4. What are we going to do? What's the strategies we're going to pursue? Well, now there's a few things you might want to do before you get there. So finally in step 4, DEI initiatives. What strategies will you pursue, and what measures will gauge your progress against those strategies? Of course, in service to your objectives from step 2. And then last but not least, DEI impact. That's the final letter I. Evaluate your results. That's both outputs and outcomes. Outputs, which measure activity, trainings, courageous conversations, number of people in an employee resource group. That's an output. An outcome is a final result, an ultimate result, what you are trying to accomplish. A more inclusive culture, more representation at the executive level, building the muscle to have difficult dialogues or courageous conversations across lines of difference. To be an inclusive leader, those are outcomes, not to be confused with outputs. So I'm going to now turn the floor over to all of you. We got about 15 minutes left for our time here, but let me offer one last slide, which is independent of whether you buy the book, although I certainly invite, encourage, and hope that you do, but independent of that, I would also invite and encourage you to go to datadrivendei.com, because there you will find free, and I'll say it again, free tools, templates, metrics, resources, best practices, and even case studies for people and for organizations. That's right. You will find case studies of people who have used data to drive measurable improvements in their own diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you'll also find case studies for organizations that have done the same. So check out the website to learn more about the free resources that are available to you right here, right now. And with that, I will open the floor for any questions and answers about data-driven DEI or anything that relates to data and DEI. Let me check the chat and see what we got. All right, Sharon's there. It's okay. All right, the floor is open. Comments or questions that I can answer. And it could be anything under the sun on data-driven DEI.
Hello, Dr. Pinkett.
Hello, Sheila.
Hi, this is Sheila. I wanted to, basically, I was going to ask the question and then you answered it, but I wanted to thank you for this valuable information. I interviewed you for a Black Gone Geek online session years ago, and you are just as informative as you were then. So thank you for all you bring. The metrics today, diversity metrics are more important than they ever have been, as DEI is a living, moving target.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to ask you about current benchmark resources, but you pretty much said we have your toolkit to find. It's just not easy for us to find a lot of this information that is accurate. And so that was the question I was going to pose, if you had any references for tried and true and current metrics information. So
yeah, first of all, Sheila, good to hear your voice. Thank you for your presence here, and thank you for the interview many moons ago. And I'm glad we're reconnected today.
For sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm a big fan of the Global Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Benchmarks, the GDEIB. Now, for those familiar with GDEIB, which you may also be familiar, GDEIB is more of a inventory of best practices around DEI, globally established with 112 or so experts, revised after 2020 from the GDIB to the GDEIB. They added equity into the mix. In fact, one of my colleagues, Rika Salonen, was one of the panelists for the GDEIB. But I only raise that for two reasons. A, it's also free, so you can download the GDEIB. But second, the metrics that are offered on the data-driven DEI website are organized by the 14 categories of the GDEIB. Like I took the GDEIB framework, which lays out these 14 areas within which you might need or want to develop metrics. Areas like learning and development, leadership and accountability, like it breaks down these 14 areas, and then my metrics break down metrics within each of those 14 categories. So I kind of took the GDEIB foundation and extended it by providing metrics in each category. That's what you'll find on the website.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I should mention this book was written in the pandemic because I was home and my kids and my family were tired of staring at me. So I had to find something to do. So I wrote a book.
I'm buying it. I'm buying it. Thank you.
I don't know if I would have written this book were it not for the pandemic. I don't know if I would have had the time, truth be told. But thank you, Sheila, for your support. I appreciate it. Other questions, comments, feedback on data-driven diversity, equity, and inclusion? Floor is open.
Good morning, Dr. Pinkett. This is Diana Starks, and it's good to see you again. Thank you. I have the book, and it's on my table to start reading. So thank you for that. The question I have is really around, you said organizations may want to use. So how important is it for organizations to find the metrics that are most important to their forward progress in DEI?
It's a great question, Diana, and thanks for showing up, and thanks for your support as well. It's a paramount importance. You all know what I know, which is every journey is unique to the person or to the organization. I mean, we've done so many assessments of organizations, DEI assessments, and the results are as diverse as the organizations themselves. And even a personal assessment is as diverse as the person who's taking the assessment. And equally, your DEI plan is only as good as your DEI assessment. And your DEI plan is only as rigorous as your DEI metrics. So the through line I'm trying to draw in answer to your question, Diana, is you have to decide which metrics are most relevant to your journey. So while I say the GDEIB has these 14 categories that may be relevant, ultimately something from among those 14 must be relevant. Like you have to indeed decide which metrics are most relevant to you. And in the book, I talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, and this difference between leading and lagging indicators. You know, a lagging indicator is diversity, meaning diversity looks retrospectively. It looks into the rear view mirror. It's not looking ahead to what might give us an indication for where we're going. It's looking back to say where we've been. But a leading indicator is something like inclusion, meaning if I'm measuring inclusion, it is likely predicting behaviors of employees moving forward. So this distinguishing factor between lagging indicators and leading indicators and key performance indicators. That is, what are the key indicators that matter most? I would argue that should be roughly about 3 to 5, no more than 7 for an organization, that you want to be focused exclusively on, that are the best measures of performance, and that will drive, hopefully, performance management, accountability, and how you strategize on an ongoing basis in order to refine the work that you're doing. So it is imperative, of paramount importance, Diana, to determine what those metrics should be, those key performance indicators should be, and to track them on an ongoing basis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other questions? We got 7 minutes left for this power-packed 30 minutes. I think it's 30 minutes. Or do I have more than that? It's 30 minutes. Other questions? So if there aren't any, then I may go back to some slides. Let me pause to see if there's any other questions or comments.
Hi, this is Deanna. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the comment on the outputs versus outcomes, as I think that's often a sticking point for many. Yet a lot of the outcomes are often tricky to get at the heart of the metrics, like inclusion, because there's a lot of contributing factors. Do you have any, I'm sure you do, have any thoughts or key metrics or things that you look at when trying to really get at the heart of what are the outcomes that are attained through DEI programs and initiatives?
I do. In fact, let me bring up a slide that may be helpful in that regard. In the book, I define what I call minimum viable metrics, or MVMs, not to be confused with MVPs. Let me go live with this slide here. Find my button here. I want to go to, let me go full screen, and let me go to share screen, and let me go to PowerPoint. All right. So let me start at a high level and then come down specific to your question. So in minimum viable metrics, meaning we can get fancy, folks, but if we're going to talk minimum viable metrics to say we've covered all of the bases, we got to measure representation. I got some head nods out there, even though I can't see anybody right now, but we got to measure representation. We got to stratify that by demographics, and stratify that by level: executive, middle manager, entry level, LGBTQIA, race and ethnicity, et cetera. Those are my demographic stratifications. Second, to your question, we got to have some way of measuring inclusivity. And to your question, I am a huge proponent of quantitative and qualitative. It can't just be a survey or an instrument, although I'm a big fan of surveys and instruments that measure inclusivity. In fact, one of my favorites is Intrinsic Inclusion by Dr. Janet Reed and Vincent Brown. But there's lots of other tools out there that can measure inclusive behavior. And that can be aggregated from the individual to the team, to the department, to the organization. But you got to throw in some interviews and focus groups, because the survey or the instrument will only tell us what behaviors or what people are experiencing. The focus groups and the interviews tell us why. And without the why, we're not painting a complete picture. So my answer to your question is having some survey or instrument that is quantitatively measuring inclusivity. And that could be a composite of a range of different questions or indicators or behaviors that you want to track. And then secondly, interviews and focus groups, where we're getting patterns of what we're seeing in those interviews and focus groups, and also lifting up the stories of what we're hearing, so we can put a face on the quantitative and the qualitative. Third is some measure of community well-being. where your organization's employees live, work, play, and invest their time and their treasure and their talent and their touch. Measuring the well-being of the local community, but which also includes how effectively you're engaging diverse suppliers, if that's relevant. And then last but not least, in the marketplace, everyone has a customer. And I use that term broadly. If it's government, it's citizens. If it's a nonprofit, maybe local residents or stakeholders. If it's a corporation, it's your consumers. Everyone has a customer. We want to know if they're satisfied and if we're achieving the desired outcomes, and stratify that by demographics. So I know where I'm doing well and with whom I'm doing well and with whom I'm not. So those are my minimum viable metrics. Again, we can get fancier on this, folks, but if you can check off 4 of those boxes, I feel like you have the foundation of measurement from a DEI perspective. Hopefully that answers your question. I got a thumbs up in this. Thank you, Deanna. I got the thumb. I'll give it back to you. I think I got 1 minute left. See what's one last burning question before I go to close. All right. Well, for those who may have showed up after we got started, let me go to this slide one more time. And as a reminder, you can go to datadrivendei.com, where you can access, again, free tools, templates, metrics, resources, best practices, and case studies. And to end where I closed, data-driven DI is a parallel path for people and for organizations. It's about how does data drive measurable improvements in diversity, equity, and inclusion for people and for organizations. And the tools you'll find on the website speak to both audiences. So thank you all so much for taking the time out of your inevitably busy schedules to join this publishing summit. I look forward to hopefully seeing many of you in Chicago for the full conference, be it in person or virtually, however you join. And I'll turn it back to Kendall and to all of you. Thank you again. Be well, be safe, and be blessed. Take care.
Thank you, Dr. Pinkett, for your presentation. It was very, very insightful. Thank you, everyone, for joining our publishing summit for this session. We also have other sessions are going to start. So if you would like to join those, please do. We'll see you at the conference. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take care.